welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. I'm Will Carey. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you've been having a good week. If you haven't, don't worry. Friday's just around the corner, and then hopefully you've got some cool plans for the weekend. My plans for the weekend, one of the things that I will be doing is I'm going to be doing a stand-up set at the Creek in the Cave at 6 p.m. this Saturday. So feel free to come and check that out. It's part of Grant Lindahl's The 8 Comedy Project, and we're hoping to have an album that we can cut together by the end of this year. If you have listened to this show semi-regularly, you may have heard a lot of people talk about a place called the Creek in the Cave, and you've definitely heard me talk about it. The Creek is a comedy, I won't even call it a comedy club. It's more of a comedy, it's more of a theater, like a comedy theater with an amazing Mexican restaurant that also has like 8 pinball machines. And the only reason I will kind of stump for this venue is because the owner does an incredible job of fostering a community around comedy and around her space, and she gives a lot of opportunities, including me, a lot of opportunities to comedians in New York City. So I will enthusiastically encourage anyone who is in New York or is moving to New York to spend some time there, because a lot of interesting shows happen, and it's also just a really great place to be. It almost feels like my second living room in a lot of ways, because I feel a responsibility to make sure that the positive vibes that the owner, Rebecca, puts out are still are maintained. So, and it's interesting because why I'm telling you this is because I have Kat Burdick on the show today, and because of scheduling, we actually ended up recording this interview on the stage at the Creek in the Cave before the first show of the night. And Kat's someone I've known for a while. Kat was a regular at my previous show before I started hosting a show. You can use that March 24th at the Creek in the Cave. Before I started hosting that show, I hosted a show at the Laughing Devil Comedy Club called Devil Science Theater 3000, where, you know, like Mystery Science, we would riff on bad B movies, and Kat was on that show a lot, and we kind of started to build a friendship from there. And Kat's one of these girls that she is very insightful about the manner of social discourse on the internet that I am repelled by. Like, I just see a lot of people, when I see like a 57 comment Facebook thread, I just see a lot of discourse, and I don't see the positive side of that. So one of the things that I talked to Kat about is about anything getting done in those 57 comment Facebook threads. And then we have a great chat about her life and comedy, and then just the challenges of balancing a personal life with an artistic pursuit and making sure that neither are neglected, as to keep both from withering. So let's go now to my chat with Kat Burdick, and I'll talk to you afterwards.
All of a sudden I wish I had like a much more in-depth, music thing at the fingertips, but I'd certainly have my knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah.
I think
well, because music was my first thing before stand-up. I don't know if it was the same for you.
And I think it's the other thing it's got a number of things going on with it. It's got glamour, but the real life of it is absolute dog shit in basements and vans, right? And everybody so it's got glamour, but you're considered a loser if you're trying to do it.
Right.
You're it's all about rhythm and passion, and then there's the extra layer of actual fucking content. So you can have like a one-hit wonder of either variety. You can have a guy who has one good album in either of those genres, and he can, ride on that for a while. And then you have the guys who are monsters of rock, and you got the David Bowies and George Carlins who pass away and everyone weeps.
Yeah, the guys who become like a bigger part of the cultural like zeitgeist.
Yeah, exactly. And then like they're both
transcend just being I like their songs. They're like a part of who I am.
Yeah. They become like a personal religious thing. And it's also like it's got an ineffable quality that you can't totally nail down. Like, there's a million guys who sound a little like Louis C.K., but they're nothing like they don't have it at all, the thing that he has, because what he has is the combination of the hilarity, the dark humor, and human decency. And they think that it is all about like the dark humor subject matter, and so they aim for that and aim for that and aim for that. And the real funny part is hearing the guy like pretzel together those terrible two parts of humanity, the part of you that is this like angel who wants to do good and do right, and the other just dirtbag piece of shit who's also always pointing out like all the underhanded, like darkly funny things that you shouldn't be laughing at, that you are, the funeral giggle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I think that's the same way with like comedians that are like really inspired by someone like Bill Burr, Patrice O'Neill.
Oh yeah.
They kind of just get, I think
they almost miss the genius of it.
Right, because underneath they just catch the they just interpret it as I'm telling it like it is, and I'm going to be a contrarian.
They hit the shock, but they don't hit the
They don't hit the part that Bill Burr is aware that he's an insane person.
Yeah, I mean, Bill Burr's the first person to say, you shouldn't be listening to me. I'm not an example of the dude to do things like. I mean, he says that. He's like literally will say that in various specials, like, why the fuck are you listening to me?
Right. It's like,
I'm some
I don't read.
Crazy guy with a fucking anger problem, this like Irish ginger son of a bitch. He gets himself. And I feel like that's the greatest comedians get, that they're not so great. Yeah. Whereas the guys who you don't know who copy them,
that's the ultimate protection from like people who are going to try to like get you to apologize for material is that you know that if you acknowledge and are aware that your opinions are probably coming from an off base place, I think you're kind of immune from people who want you to like feel bad about something that you said. Right. Whereas the guys who I think don't get it, always come off as condescending and rude and unaware
because they're
of
acting
their own
like
faults.
They're exactly. It's because it's totally unaware. It doesn't have that that little smack of like, aren't we all just pieces of shit? Mm-hmm. It's that thing of like, I'm great and I've noticed all this, you fucking hypocrites. I'm the only one with the guts to say this. I'm the best. They're not, nobody great is like that. Nobody great is like that. Like Patrice O'Neill didn't act like that, even though he was the first guy to go psst, and put his head back at you and just show you the absolute fucking least respect on like Tough Crowd. Right. He still wasn't going like, I'm the fucking king. Like he would like, it's just not a part of those guys. And it's weird because it's so much a part of so many of the dudes who are like, I'm sure there's some girls who try to copy that,
Yeah, because like Patrice, like he knows what he thinks works for him, but he's also enough to say, I don't know if this is right. I might just be full of shit.
Right, and he definitely, like, he'd say that in between making me great. Like, if you listen to his WTF, there are parts where I'm, like, clapping because I agree so much. And then there's parts where I'm like, Patrice, how come you can't hear that? That's because you were raised by this one lady that has this one problem. You're blaming everybody. Like, I want to have, like, a fucking, therapy session with the guy. Like, let's both figure this out.
Oh, my God,
which is just ridiculous.
Like, trying to figure out the psychology behind how
every
people
single
feel.
fucking comedian.
Yeah, like, trying to figure out the psychology behind, like, how comedians think and react the way they do.
Yeah.
Just from the few episodes I've done of this, I understand the people I've talked to at least a little bit better.
Oh, yeah. I think that's one of the things I do like about...
Because I'm also looking for answers for myself.
Oh, yeah. Aren't we all? It's yeah, I feel like we are kind of just a giant, mass amoeba trying to come up with answers. I think that's one of the problems with the bipolarization we're having lately. Not lately, whatever. I don't really believe it's a time thing, but
maybe
people
the
are
last
pulling
like
apart. 3
to 4 years.
The thing is, it's always like this, and there are times when it pulses and it gets extreme, but it's always here. That half of the people have stimulus response, but no real common sense. So when you say a thing like, I like Trump because he says it like it is, it's like he's saying that he's a racist bag of shit and he's not hiding it, but that's not in itself admirable. I saw somebody put up a joke, something like, I wish I could source this. I'll tell you later so we can like tag it in there. But
Okay.
It was something like, that's like saying that you admire a rapist because he's a go-getter and doesn't take no for an answer. It's just like,
Oh
no,
my gosh,
that's not. That's brilliant.
That's
right?
that's a brilliant comparison.
It's a brilliant observation. That's why I have to look up like the person who did it. It's because I was like, that totally nails the issue, because just because you like someone's style doesn't mean you love their content. That's why like.
Which
Ruth
is
Bader
totally
Ginsburg
the
could be
business.
friends with Scalia and still fucking kill him in legal arguments because she doesn't fucking agree with the entire way he comes at life, and
Right.
she can still have spaghetti with him because that's humanity. Yeah.
No, yeah, exactly. And I think, and the thing about the go-getter part is like that's a admirable business characteristic of like a businessman, like
Right.
the go-getting it, persistence, not taking no for an answer, figuring out manipulation of how to get what you want. Those are all like, I think like business 101 kind of tactics that I think maybe Trump specifically people admire. But then when you apply those things to like, if you apply those to sex, you're a criminal.
Right, exactly, because
And a
that's not supposed to
sociopath,
be
probably.
transactional, right? Like, and if it is supposed to be transactional, we should have legitimate, like, legal sex work where you go and you pay and you do your thing, but
Right.
not where you, like, pretend that shit's based on love. That's the thing that always drives me crazy when guys do the, like, oh, my wife, my ex-wife, blah, 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 blah. So it's like, well, like, and especially when they're like, well, they're complaining because they didn't like that I was with other women. It's like, yeah, because that's the agreement.
Yeah.
That
No, I
you like.
probably
That's
have
the
a problem
whole
with it, too.
vows section. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. But then don't sign the contract with the lady and get mad that she wants to hold you to the terms, man. Like, if you don't want one vagina sheath forever, I hear you 100%. Makes perfect sense to me. But what doesn't make sense is signing up for that deal, telling everyone how much you love her and it's different, and then later being a total just leaky asshole about it. And acting like it's not your fault. Like, you walked in with all the information. It's the same thing when people complain about having signed a shitty contract. It's like, you read that shitty contract. As much as, like, I fucking hate that anybody could do that, it's right up front for you. So calling foul after
knew
is
what
dumb.
was happening. You knew what the terms were, and
Yeah, they want the good part, but not the bad part. They want to be able to be like, yeah, I want somebody to be home when I'm there, and yeah, I want somebody to have my kids, and yeah, I want somebody to be faithful to just me. I don't want to do all that stuff for them, but and then it's like, okay, well, that's not the deal.
right.
Yeah, right. You can't make a sandwich with one piece of bread. Well, technically you can because you do that fold over thing that you do when you
exactly.
broke. But still,
For
it's not
sure.
a proper sandwich.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, and just while we're on the topic of marriage, is that all those people that fuck it up are putting seeds of doubt in the heads of people that because
Right, exactly. Then everyone's like, look, I'm just doing statistically, I got to be suspicious of my husband.
Right.
Like you're
And
a
then-
fool if you're not, right? And I'm like,
yeah,
oh, that's
and
dumb.
then you know what I think happens with that sometimes is you could be the most faithful, loyal person, but then the other person is, if they're suspicious, and I think eventually most rational people would get tired of being accused.
Oh, yeah. It gets
And-
to be that thing of being like, wait, so I'm literally suffering all the punishment of doing something I'm not doing. After a few years of this, maybe I should get to actually enjoy, like,
Maybe I should do the thing
right? Like,
that you say I
if I'm
am.
doing the time, I should enjoy doing the crime at some point, right? Like,
Yeah.
I
Is
guess
that a phrase? I've
it
never
is
heard that.
You've heard the term like do
Yes.
if you do the crime, you do the time. I saw somebody refer to it the other day as a case where I think it was just a comment on Reddit, so I don't know who to credit this to, but it was somebody saying like, my little sister figured out that she could yell for my mom and say that I'd hit her and get me in big trouble. And she did it 3 times before I figured out,
Right.
well, screw it. If I'm going to get in trouble, I'm going to just really whack this little girl. And he's like, it took 1 time before she figured out that didn't work anymore. And I was like, yeah, that's about right. Because it's like, it's just a situation where if you get set up for it over and over and over, the world already makes no sense. So you might as well like be, insane, especially because theoretically your relationship is supposed to be your place of security. I mean, that's not really how it works for most people, but that's supposed to be the most safe place, the most centered, the place where somebody actually gives a shit about you, gives a shit about your shitty concerns and your shitty day and your pointless stories. And if you come there and you're not comfortable and you're getting treated suspiciously, like you're sitting with the cops,
Then
like
you're
all of a sudden
then
you've twisted it. It's the worst situation you could be in.
Right.
And that just
then
drives
you're
people
someone
crazy.
with out of country. And then you're like one of those people
exactly.
that's like,
you have no
I love
safe
working
landing
late.
spot. Yeah, exactly. Like
I love working late because I don't want to come home.
No, actually, nothing makes me worry more than like when Will's comfortable with working late because I'm like, sorry, my husband's name is Will, which might be confusing to your listeners, but
no, I imagine that if I was your husband and we were doing,
we would have mentioned this by now.
Would have made
you son of a bitch! Are you talking about that time I told you to stop looking at that waitress?
Oh my gosh, this is so funny because I did a couples edition of my monthly show here last night, and I had a couple of comedians that were dating each other on the show, and there's joke that I was going to have. The whole premise of the show is that you get suggestions from someone.
Oh yeah.
But normally I do it from non-comedians, but for this show I was going to have the comedian couples suggest things, and it was all like weirdly passive aggressive. What about that time kind of stuff?
Oh, nice. All right.
Like.
That's hilarious.
And that's.
I was going to ask you who it was, but now I'm not because I don't want to out him.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you.
I think I can guess.
Everybody's.
But like, frankly, that's
everybody is good. Everybody is fine.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, that's the other thing about comedian couples is they do have senses of humor. So it is. Hey, Lupe. So it's a real trade-off between them feeding each other lines and setups and bits and doing it with each other, and then also being hugely pissed off and snarky. So I can't imagine, like, that's got to be a really hard cycle. My husband's not a comedian. I mean, he's a school teacher, but that's what I was saying about him staying late. It's like, if you're willing to stay at a public school voluntarily, I'm doing something terribly wrong. Unless it's not warm in the apartment, which is sometimes the case. But
no, same here.
You can hear we're getting good levels.
Yeah, the levels are good.
Excellent.
Are some of these concerns that you've had for a long time in previous relationships? Where does that stem from?
Wow. Which concern specifically?
The like overly suspicious, or like.
No,
like
I mean we don't like we actually don't have that
stuff?
for a long time.
And I don't mean in your relationship with your husband, maybe just in your
see, like when you were saying like,
general.
what were your relationships before? I mean that's such a like weirdly embarrassing question to answer. I actually didn't have a lot of relationships before that. I had like a couple of like flirtations and like one summer fling thing, but and Will was it was an attempt at like a Catholic girl gone bad, like slutty weekend that got entirely out of hand, and ended in me being married for the last 11 years. So
the way God intended.
Right, exactly. Like I totally warn girls now, like don't be slutty. This might get you married. It's the worst. Like what are you doing? But it's just like
Catholic.
So exactly. I was So I went to CCD. I was a Catholic girl.
Where did you grow up again?
Everywhere. I was a military brat, so all up and down the East Coast. I was born overseas. Like we moved constantly. I think the longest place I was ever in one house was like 3 years.
Okay, yeah.
So it was. From that, I'm used to like that's probably where I get the comedy thing is like you have to learn to warm up the crowd real quick, and you might be here for 5 fucking minutes, so you better like gauge the situation, be friendly, be funny, and get the fuck out of here.
I see.
And but with Will, it's like we were together like 8 or 9 years before we got married. Because I wasn't really into the idea of getting married for a lot of reasons, but also because I didn't want to disappoint anybody. I didn't want to like worry about being suspicious or them being suspicious or what, like that thing where you have to have ownership.
No,
but
yeah,
I'm also not into
is.
an open marriage either. People ask that all the time in comedy because I guess there's a few comedy couples that have like open marriages. I'm not into that.
I for the longest time thought kind of the idea of an open marriage was sort of a mirage
I do think it's a mirage because
BS.
I think it sounds like a great idea. I think technically it could be a great idea, but not if you're raised the way we're all raised.
Yeah,
like if you started out that way, maybe.
Yeah, I just don't have the faith in human nature to not grow jealous or.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to help it that way. Like, and I'm not naturally a jealous person. And Will's had a lot of female friends, and I'm friends with most of his ex-girlfriends. And in fact, one of them has historically not been the most polite to me, and that was the girl that actually had asked to be in an open relationship with him before me and him started dating. And then I was like, I don't want to be in an open relationship. So if you're with me, that's what's up. And so I feel like she feels like I sharked it. But it's like, whatever. If you want to bang other dudes at Oberlin, fine. But you can't be leaving this 6.5 foot tall man laying around Chicago boneless. It's not going to, no. So it didn't work out for her for whatever. And that's fine. But the thing is, there was a long time where he was like, oh, well, you just don't like her because she's my ex-girlfriend. I was like, I just talked to your ex-girlfriend, Margaret, 2 days ago, and she's great. I like your ex-girlfriend, Dominique. She's fine, and I remember the stories about her family. I know the girl that you first kissed, and we get along. This girl I don't like. She called my house every day looking for you for like a month when we lived together in college, and I gave you the message every day like I was being cool about it.
Right.
And then, like the 11th time after you have not called her back, she says, well, are you even giving him the messages? And I'm like, all right, that's annoying.
Like,
and then,
please.
and then I went overseas for a year to go to Oxford, and she like was making little overtures and attempts then because I was out of town. And I sent her like a real angry email where I believe there was a quote in it that was like, I threatened to go, quote, Jerry Springer on her, which is probably not my finest moment. But that was like, pre-2000.
Well, going to Jerry Springer on her is like you get one punch in and then Steve Wilkos pulls you
Right,
apart.
exactly. I was like, I get one good smack.
And you just need to be smacked once.
Right, and then like we fight a midget. But it was just like, my thing is like, I will get jealous when jealousy is called for. And I will get insulted when it's insulting.
Yeah.
So when you send a letter to somebody married and tell them to sneak away from their life for a week, I'm insulted that you are acting like I don't fucking exist and that's a fucking option. So then I get
even
pissed.
have the gall. I would never even
Right?
have the
Who
gall.
would have the gall? Who would have the gall? I'll tell you who has the gall. A woman who's not married to a dude. So yeah. So there are times when I've been really pissed off or jealous, but I feel like you have to actually be called for it. Whereas there's cases like I don't know, Will's really he's really good about it now because he knows me so well, I think. And I think he's also been to enough mics and shows where other girls high-fived me on the sight of him, which is not good for me because his ego gets big, but it is good for his self-esteem. But so he feels a little more secure in it now. But there were times in college where I'd go to pick up my film back when you had your film processed, go to pick up my pictures at the 1 hour photo, and the guy would keep me there too long because he wants to chit chat. And at the time, I didn't know how to be like, "Hey, fucknut, I want my pictures. Let's go, chop chop."
Yeah.
I would be polite, right? And so it would drag on, and then Will would act like I wanted to bang that dude. It's like, no, I just wanted my photos, and he was stalling, and I don't know how to be mean. So it's there were times when there was jealousy without call for it, but and then there was times where there was jealousy where, in retrospect, there was call for it. A girlfriend of mine who is, her sexuality is fluid. We were both total night owls, and we were talking a lot during that year. And I was really bummed out and depressed, and I was working I had 20 credit hours. I was working a 20-hour a week job, and I was doing 3 hours of work study after to make extra money for school. And just everything was cold and depressing, and I was so hungry all the time. Everything sucked. And Will and I had just moved in 3 months before that, and I was talking to my friend so much that he was like, I'm worried that she's gonna steal you." I was like, no, that is not not even close to what's happening. But in retrospect, I'm like, I get why if he, we were still fairly new, so he didn't know me as well. But also now in all the intervening years, I am aware that girl she didn't care what Will thought of any of it. If I wanted to be with her, we probably would have been able to do some stuff. So I get why then, it's the same thing of me being in some cases I'm jealous because you should be a little jealous and worried because that's legit, something's happening in your little sphere. And I think that was one where it's he was right to be worried in that I actually technically had that option. Right. Whereas photo guy, there's no situation was happening. But but at the same time, he was wrong because I just wanted somebody to talk to about floor tile and how much I liked this particular color combo.
Sure.
We were just making late night trips to Home Depot, which I know to him probably sounded like bullshit, but they were absolutely real. And so, it's really hard to figure that shit out. I mean, we've been together now for a ridiculous amount of time.
And I imagine you feel like you know each other at least a bit more now.
Oh, yeah. And there's been whole, when you're together, we're almost together. I mean, this is insane. We got together in 1996 for the first time that we were ever together. So it's 20 That makes me sound so old, but it's 20 years.
I don't want to tell you what I was doing
insane.
in 1996.
Right? No, I'm sure you were in the second fucking grade. Well, but so like maybe don't say first. So it was first, wasn't it?
Well, what was 96? 96 probably would have been fourth grade.
Well, that makes me feel a little better. At least you could read.
I could read.
So
and I was in the hospital recovering after running through a glass door.
Oh my God! They didn't put stickers on it. They had to do that to all the doors in North Carolina because kids would and dogs just right through the plate glass.
Yeah, well, they switched it to like safety glass after that.
Oh yeah, well that makes sense. Oh my God, for real? Like were you just a runner or was this a freak occurrence?
My mom jumped out from behind a door to like scare me as a joke.
She must have felt so bad.
Oh, she still does.
Oh my God.
She still does. I still have like a giant
show.
scar from. I'll show you at some point. It's on my arm. Don't worry.
I would be
Nothing
like
weird.
it. I mean, this sounds terrible but my family's like military, so we would have a problem with two parts of that. One, the massive amount of Catholic guilt, clearly, but two,
well, Episcopalian, Catholic light.
In my case, right. In our case, it would be full on, and then the military pride of being able to terrify someone so much that they run through a plate glass window. Because I will say
really
this:
that's
good
really
job,
the key.
Mom. That's pretty high level.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Like, you imagine a war where you just frighten the other enemy into hurting themselves.
Oh yeah. That's
Like, if you could just
they used to do stuff like
ISIS
that. They
into
did
blowing themselves up.
They used to try to, over France, they would project images of the Virgin Mary because the French are not going to fire, like, they're not going to fire on a holy miracle. They're not going to fire on,
Right.
Like a vision of God. So you just stop them in their tracks. So I guess that's fear of God. That's not the same as being frightened, but it's up there.
Right. Okay.
But anyway, I was saying with the whole 20 years, you go through lifetime eras. I mean, you go through eons that are very different from each other. There are times, and we usually refer to whatever the time period is by the apartment we were living in.
Okay.
Because that's the most like easy reference. Okay, like in the Whipple years, or whatever. And we moved here from Chicago a long time ago, but now we've been in our place for like 10 years. We feel like we're getting like we're static characters. We're not, we're not changing much anymore.
Awesome. So you speak about, and because I have a lot of what I'm seeing a lot of myself in you. This sort of hesitance to jump into marriage and the contracts based out of there.
Well, right, because you don't want to disappoint.
Because
right?
And for me, it's a lot of fear of it falling apart and what I could do to another person or what that person could like legally or emotionally do to me.
Yeah, especially once you set up paper, because before, if you leave each other, it's very painful and it sucks. But you literally just say, I'm going, and you pack your shit and you fucking leave, and maybe you have to send them like the end of a rent check or something.
Right.
But you don't have to tear your life apart. There's no like trips to the goddamn DMV that you have to make. There's nothing.
Right. There's no
radical.
Lawyers.
Right. Exactly. There's no point where you have to send them a
if
portion of your paycheck forever.
Right.
Shit like that.
And there's no threat if you don't send them a portion of your paycheck, they'll get you arrested and sent to jail.
Right. Exactly. And then there's stuff like your kids. Like that's something that I do really sympathize with men, which is not a phrase I say that often. But
yeah, I know.
But
I wanted
the fact
to talk
that like your kid is inside another person. That's got to be terrifying, because it's terrifying enough, the idea of your kid being inside your body. That's a whole level of Aliens movie that it's its own terror show to handle. But there's got to be something absolutely terrifying about having that absolutely contained inside of another person and having them responsible for it, and then just having to hand over that trust. Like you see a lot of relationships go wrong and people use kids against each other, and that seems like that would just tear your heart out of your chest.
Yeah, no, and I was, because when my parents got divorced, I was sort of I don't feel like I was. Yeah, I was very much in between, and I was fed one side of the story, and it took me a long time to even want to listen to the other side of the story.
Yeah,
and now I don't, because I had been sort of, my moral compass had been about hating him and not wanting to be like him.
Yeah.
And now realizing that there's sort of a gray area.
Yeah, there's two sides of the story, and I'm not saying that as somebody who's giving dudes passes if they're abusive or something like that.
Yeah.
But there's still, if you are
not
raised,
abuse, just general fuckery.
Right,
but then,
exactly.
But then like, you find out maybe what pushes someone to general fuckery.
But then also,
and then
like,
that fucks
you
with, like,
get that even the description of it is has a bias to it, even if somebody's totally right, and that you learn to hear when you're older. But when you're fed it when you're a little kid, it's so fundamental that to dismantle it fucks with you a lot, I think, because you had to take apart an essential truth to even understand that there was another part of the story you weren't hearing.
Right.
Even if the general, like, let's say that, the general characterizing of it was accurate, that's still not the whole story, and you still deserve to get to hear the other part, and you still deserve to decide for yourself if you want to take this phone call without feeling like you're betraying another family member. And that's like, every time I see a kid put in that position, it's like, holy shit, I can't handle that in my 30s. I can't imagine, like, you're not even at double digits yet, and you're like worrying about people's fucking mental foundations because that's how sensitive you've become.
Yeah.
And especially, like, that is a thing I kind of hate about the single mom thing, is you get trapped where you're there with these kids and they're your people that you're spending all your time with. They end up being confidants in inappropriate ways sometimes, which makes them grow up too fast. Yeah, there's like a certain level.
Yeah, something, I was seeing a therapist for a while, and they said that level of being confidants almost bordering on some kind of like, I can't remember the exact phrase. It's like a fake
husband. They're almost using you as a fake boyfriend. It's not like incestuous. That sounds too much.
I think the phrase emotional incest came up.
Yeah, it might be like that, but like feel like you're made to be a surrogate for the husband that's supposed to be there, or a surrogate for a best friend. So it's this position where they don't have anybody else, and you're there, so they talk to you, and once they've said a little too much, and then you have that context, and then they tell you a little too much, and they don't mean to do it, but it's just way the fuck too much.
It just happens, and it's a hard reset to do because you're and that sometimes you're probably learning things that you're maybe not emotionally prepared for, and now you have to
no one's
reconcile.
ever emotionally prepared for your parents' like weird like sexual and relationship history. Like that's just, it's too fraught with all the shit in movies that makes you cringe and cry when it's strangers, much less when you're finding out about like real people that fucking made you, and that's the other thing. People are like, okay, so what part of that is me? Do they hate
how much?
me?
Yeah, how much
Does she
of
hate
that
the half
do I have
of me
inside
that's
me?
this dude? Am I gonna be like that? Is it uncontrollable now? Right. Oh.
Yeah. Did you have like similar things like that?
Well, my parents are still
married. So you were growing up on so your parents are still married.
Yeah, they got pregnant with me as teenagers. Did the old Catholic shuffle in a blue dress and military uniform into the old chapel. Had me. I was a real easy baby, so right away they had my sibling. So we were like Irish twins. And then, they're still married. And it is some classic repressed white people like stuff. It's
just like a lot of people really not saying what they would really like to say.
Oh yeah, and mostly for fear that someone will finally snap. I think that's what it is like, especially in a military family, there is so much built up shit inside everyone that no one knows. You're stoic. Nobody goes to therapy.
My dad was in the Navy, so it's not like, is your mom or dad in the military?
My dad. He was an Army guy for a long time.
So you can't have feelings really.
Well, you can have them, and you can fucking stuff them, and you can take a shower and eat a sandwich and go for a fucking walk, maybe take a nap. That's Catholic therapy. You wake up, you feel the fuck better. If you want to feel really good about it yourself, go down to the fucking soup kitchens, help somebody with a real problem, you whiny prick. That's Catholic therapy.
Right.
Yeah.
Now that's a really interesting point, because that the whole like, it's like almost like first world problems before that became like a hashtag and everything. So like, so you feel bad, and then, but like you rationally
bad for feeling bad,
and then you're angry at yourself for feeling bad, and then you're never addressing the first problem.
Yeah, you're just trapped in a cesspool whirlwind of bullshit.
That's what I think makes people snap.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like if people don't have like a something physical that they do, or
they're in a loop. They're in a feedback loop of feeling bad, and then feeling bad that you feel bad because you don't have a reason to feel bad, so now you feel even worse, and then you keep doing this cycle of feeling shittier and shittier for not magically feeling good all the fucking sudden in this, which is nuts.
Right.
And you definitely don't have anybody to talk to, and when on the rare occasion, I think, especially in those communities, where somebody fucking white knuckles it, right? After hearing from a zillion sources, if you need help, ask for help, talk to someone. It's the biggest trap in the fucking world, because then they come out and they ask somebody for help. and somebody's dismissive about it, and then they just feel like the ultimate cowardly garbage piece of shit in the world, and then they blow their brains out. It's terrible. I mean, it happens
or what
to our
happens
troops
now
constantly
is
because they can
or what
remember all
happens-
the shit that happened. It doesn't match what the fucking media says when they come home, and then they can't deal with that cognitive dissonance of being put in a position where to say the truth sounds like they're dishonoring these people they worked with.
Right.
So they're just screwed.
Yeah.
Like the only way you can deal with it is to leave.
The unfortunate thing now is it's not just suicide. There's like, I'm going to kill myself, but I want to take some people with
out.
me.
Yeah. And well, in a lot of cases, they take out family. And I think they're not taking out the family and sounds terrible, they're not taking them out as revenge or punishment. They're taking them out because they feel responsible and that they can't leave them behind to have no one to care for them if they're going to be gone.
Yeah.
They're doing it to, and you see this all the time with like ladies who lose their shit and drown their kids. They always say the same thing. I was trying to save them. I was trying to protect them from the absolute bullshit whirlwind of crazy dysfunction that is their whole lives. You know, it's like technically, they did need to be saved from something. This was not the method. But literally that's all people can think of is like this chaos has to end and I have no other mechanisms for this. And it's fucked up to watch. It's interesting to watch comedians because there is so much dysfunction in all of those history. It does kind of,
right.
It is kind of a requirement for the need to get on stage. I feel like is that
Which
thing
I
of
feel
like
is
I
like
need
the-
somebody to out loud approve of me.
Right. Which I
Yeah.
think plays into the assumption or the stereotype that comedians are like fucked up people.
Yeah.
And there's at some point in your life there's a lack of support or acceptance, and that drives you towards finding that comedy and the sound of laughter is the sound of acceptance.
Absolutely. And I think also for you, finding the comedy is you going, I managed to make the good feeling out of this whirlwind of bullshit. Like that I managed to, the feeling bad for feeling bad for feeling bad turns into laughing at how stupid this fucking cycle is, and it gets you somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I do like seeing that at, not so much at Mike's because Mike's are a shit show of everyone, testing out things. It's
Sure.
first drafts, but
can
I
you
do
tell
love
me
seeing
the
it
moment
from
where
regular
you-
ones. Oh,
I'm sorry, but
Oh, no,
what did you say?
well, I just mean like I like seeing how each person who's great expresses pieces of that and lets it out. Like
So-
you hear a little bit from her family from Maria Bamford. You hear a little bit of family from Ellen Cleghorn. You hear a little bit of family from Louis C.K. And
Yes.
these little pieces give you like so much about how this person got there.
Yeah. Can you tell me the moment leading up to when you find comedy as the thing?
Oh, for me, it was really early. I was always a talky kid. Clearly, I'm a motor mouth now, but I talked so quickly as a little kid. I had a huge vocabulary really early, and I could read really early. But my
Are we talking,
ideas
like,
came
4 or 5?
No, like 2 or 3.
Oh, 2 or 3. Okay.
So I was so like talkative and talked so fast, and of course in a little kid voice, so it's that tinny shit. Nobody could understand me about maybe my mom. And even sometimes she'd miss it. She'd be like, but so I would just like go on and on about these ideas. And so they had to send me to speech therapy to slow down. And I was like, every other kid in there had a stutter. And so I couldn't figure out what it was that was wrong with me, that I was in speech therapy. And I was so mad that their way of fixing things was to make me slow down. I was infuriated. But they were really just helping me learn to enunciate words and consonants so people could tell what the hell I was saying. And so slowly over I think it was end of kindergarten, beginning of first grade, and I forget which one it was. I think it was first grade.
Okay.
We had show and tell, and I had forgotten my thing for show and tell, and I was absolutely destroyed. But I'd had a really funny dream the night before, and so I was like, I'm going to tell them about my dream. The teacher's like, all right, okay, I'll give you 3 minutes for this, right? 3-minute mic, my first 3-minute mic.
Okay.
So I get a chair and I stand up on it. Like I've never seen stand-up comedy, seen it at this point, but I've heard it on a Bill Cosby tape.
Okay.
And I tell them about my dream, and then begin to embellish it when it starts getting laughs, because it is about a dinosaur who is walking around eating poop and stepping in what we called egg puddles. In Florida, there's these puddles with this very sulfurous water that smells like rotten eggs. And as a kid, that was the grossest thing. You could push somebody in one or stomp in it. And I told just this dumb dream, but the kids were falling out. I think probably just because I was saying poop in school. That's
Sure.
all it took, right? but I had some kind of timing that I'm sure I was stealing from Bill Cosby. And they were falling out. And she let me go on for like 2 extra minutes, which was a big deal at the time. I remember coming down, like sitting down from that and being like, oh, that was amazing. Oh my God. I want to do that every time. But then later she's like, no, you can't, you can't just tell, you have to bring in like real show and tell shit. And then I remember like 2 years later, I was reading a ton of books and I noticed all my books had orphans in them. All the parents were gone. Like all the interesting people had terrible tragedy and probably dead parents. So I remember sitting there going,
so you're a Batman girl, right?
Right, right. Well, like also an Anna Green Gables girl and a David Copperfield girl and a Oliver girl. I was reading a lot of, I had like a condensed Dickens that I was big into at the time. And then...
So like, impoverished ordinary people
right, like
who
all,
learn
like
their
all
special.
kinds of terrible things that would happen to you. And I remember sitting there, like I think it was 7. And sitting in my like little closet that had 2 bookshelves in it, and that's where all my books were, my little library, and going, man, you know, I have like 2 parents and a good life. Like I'm never gonna make a good comedian. I'm never gonna make a good, interesting person in a story. I'm never gonna have interesting stories. And then it's funny because this is going to sound crazy, but I literally remember hearing some part of a voice inside myself say, be careful what you wish for. And literally like a week later, just terrible shit started happening. And then I I feel like the same voice was like, see what you did. Like,
right.
You wished for for everything to become painful and terrible. And now you got character, kid. Hope you fucking enjoy it. Like, yeah. So like, I feel like I got that early. And then I was really obsessed when I was like 11, 12, 13 with like Annie Evening at the Improv and David Letterman. I would get up really late and plug in like this one earphone thing into the TV and then turn it on and put it on real low, put a blanket over it so I could like watch the show late at night.
Right.
I mean, I was obsessed. And then when I was 16, I tried to go to a comedy club in Williamsburg and just get them to put me up, which I wasn't aware, like, at the time was not a thing they do.
Williamsburg, Brooklyn?
No,
Virginia?
Colonial Williamsburg.
Oh, Colonial Williamsburg.
They had like a resort with a comedy club at it that would,
Okay.
chuckle fucks or whatever the fuck.
Sure.
And I tried to like just go in, like, as soon as I could drive. As soon as I could drive. It was like the first place I went. Like, can I just go up and do comedy? The lady was so nice. She was like, oh, honey, like, no, like people with agents, like they call and arrange, to do. And I was like, totally crushed. And what I realized later is I should have gone back every day that week, and they would have eventually been like, fine, give her fucking 5 minutes. I don't care anymore. But I did, like, I think I was just scared that I was being inappropriate and shitty and like trying to jump out of my lane. But it was a weirdly significant thread for me, because the more I moved schools, the more being the funny kid was a huge part of whether or not I was accepted, because I didn't have a lot of other like.
That was your way of blending socially.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not blending, but at least having some kind of friends and some kind of influence.
Sure.
I was good at like cut downs when cut downs were a thing. That was, like the dozens when I lived in North Carolina. I was good at like corny jokes later and did, puns and crap like that. But I was always like trying to get laughs because that was my skill. I was not fashionable. I never owned anything with a brand name. Always had a terrible haircut. I wasn't like particularly pretty past like the 2nd grade. So like there wasn't something else going for me real big. But you're right. Like you hear that laughter and you hear people saying, all right, you're okay. And you feel like everything's all right. And also that everything's all right and you didn't take anything from anybody.
Right.
Well, unless you're mocking someone. Bullying's a separate issue. You can get a lot of laughs doing that. But if you're just purely making the people in the room laugh, you just got something for yourself and you gave something at the exact same time. It's somehow the least selfish thing you're doing.
Right. And especially if you're doing stuff that's like personal or is like autobiographical, it's like a validation of.
Yeah, because somebody else in the room would never have said that out loud, but needed to hear somebody say it so they know they're not a freak.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How many people are walking around thinking that something very, very common that they feel makes them a fucking monster, right? Exactly. And all they need is to hear somebody else have the fucking guts to say it out loud and not expect to be perfect.
Yeah. No, Maron says that like the best thing you can do as a comic is, and I'm talking about Mark Maron, but I can't imagine if you're listening to this that you
if you've gotten this
think
far,
I'm referring to anyone
Mark
else. I can't imagine, like he says that like the best thing you do as a comic is make someone feel less alone, which is very punk rock thing. Like the way that band, your first like favorite band, makes you feel like less of a freak.
Oh yeah, absolutely, definitely. It's funny. We were talking about the music right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right. It's the exact same thing. It makes you feel like there is a rhythm and a passion in life worth sticking around for, that there's someone speaking to you somehow, even though they don't fucking know you, speaking directly to your life. I mean, I definitely I've already dated myself hardly, but I mean, Nirvana was a huge deal. And it's I was just downstairs before we got here at the Creek in the Cave, and I was listening to some sweet ass Lauryn Hill, and I was like, there was this wave of gratitude washed over me that she came out with two of the greatest albums I feel like ever in the world at the end of high school and the beginning of college for me. Like Miseducation, Lauryn Hill, I think came out like my freshman year. It was so good that it felt like the world had changed. And the world was exactly the fucking same, but I felt that something magical had entered it, and it makes it that powerful. And it's the same thing with all the comedy. You know, you heard the first time you fucking heard Carlin, you probably peed your pants.
Yeah.
Going like, how does he fucking know? So funny.
York. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And Jammin' in New York's a pretty bitter one, so I like that's great because I like most people. I feel like Jammin' in New York's a little dark.
I think it just ends on. It has everything that I liked in
Isn't
comedy.
that the one he starts with "fuck the children"?
Is
that one?
No, he talks about the Persian Gulf in the beginning, and then that's where he says you can build, if you get rid of all the golf courses, you can house homeless
Everybody
people.
Homeless, yeah.
There's that great bit about like things that bring us together. It's like a 7-minute long improvisational bit. It's fantastic. Yeah, you have those like big aha moments.
I love. I love that there are still bits I saw an Evening at the Improv when I was 11 that I still repeat to myself because they were great points. And if I have here, wait 1 second.
Yeah, no problem.
Whoa, in my nose. But there's a thing that happens. I have a set that I really like doing right now, and it's like a modification of a set I've been doing a long time that changed somewhat because of like life shit. But there are parts of it that I really love. But the problem with them is that they make good points in the joke. So a lot of times I'll tell it, people will have huge laughs, but then break into discussion groups, and then so the next part starts getting like compromised because there's all of a sudden like two groups of people talking about what a great point that was, except that like now's not the time to talk. So it's like I want to be inspirational and I want to make you so excited that you like later that night mention that joke to another person. I just don't want you to do it like right then. But I felt the exact same way.
Have I seen any of this set? Because this might get into like the last question I want to ask.
Well, I think. There's a bunch of pieces of it that I'm thinking of. There's a part where I talk about a high school coach that gave kids porn and how I felt like that was kind of stealing a moment that is usually kind of a family moment of like a cousin or an uncle giving you porno, and that's not fair that they took that like precious moment. And there's something about guys who are like been listening to me say that it's not okay to give these young guys porn who go, yeah, wait a second, that is a good point. Like I want to be I want to be there for my family. And then there's like a part about and I've been using this as my opener for a long time, which one person once told me not to do, but I don't give a shit. But it's about the idea that like anyone thinking that women wouldn't be great stand-ups is stupid because it's lengthy answers to the question, what you thinking? Because it's standing around running your mouth. Like, we're qualified, right? Yeah. And there's something about those pieces where it like, I start the joke and people are like, oh, haha. And then I do another tag to it, and then they're laughing harder, and then another tag, and they're laughing harder, and another tag, and then usually even the guys who didn't want to laugh at the beginning, who are like, yeah, whatever, bitch, you're not as funny, are dying, and I'm really happy, but then also, same thing, like a fucking discussion group starts breaking out, and like, that is an excellent point, I'm going to say that the next time.
Is it possible that I think I know I've seen that joke. Is there a point where you're like knocking the microphone over and getting and like kind of yelling at points?
I definitely yell at parts. I don't think I ever knock the stand over also because I'm always so worried about getting yelled at about fucking up equipment. But yeah, there's definitely parts where I'm passionately frustrated during those sets.
Yeah.
But I do remember like one time a man actually yelled out I get the best heckles. He yelled the phrase, "That's an excellent observation." I was just like, that's the best. Like, I get the best fucking heckles. One time I've ever gotten like what I think of as a negative heckle. I had one lady one time yelled, "You suck," because I took a pot shot at somebody sitting up front, which we were talking about earlier, like somebody sitting in the front row. Right. And it's a shitty thing. It's not typical of me, and I usually don't do it. But and she was right. It did suck. But all my other heckles are like, "You're beautiful." Like if I'm doing a bit about looking gross,
right?
It's always some drunk Brooklyn guy trying to make you feel better. It's like I can't get that mad unless you've totally messed up my rhythm.
Sure,
I can't get that pissed if a heckler is just testifying. I can't really think of it as a heckle.
Definitely.
It's when they yell, "You suck," that I feel like that's officially a heckle.
Right, and it's just dismissive based on the fact that you're a woman, and that's.
No, and the only I suck I've ever gotten was from a lady, and it was about that pot shot I took at a guy, and it was a guy she knew, so I think she was sticking up.
She was
caping for a friend. Yeah,
Gotcha.
I couldn't blame her for it. Like I said, she was right. That moment did suck for.
Gotcha.
Suck for pretty much everyone, but no, I've been lucky so far.
That's good, because this is sort of what I want to ask you. Just again, more of a general life advice question, and then we'll get out. We'll get out. So
I don't mean to be like, if you need more time.
Oh no, it's cool. No, this is.
I mean, I'm like absentmindedly
efficient.
like counting like little bits of cash in my pocket, so it totally looks to Will, guys, like I'm trying to I gotta go, man. Let me count my tolls. All right, go ahead.
So here's what I'm thinking. So we were talking a bit earlier about how the tone of the conversation on stand up, at least online, is very kind of. I wouldn't say it's very vitriolic, and it's very like there's different camps and there's a lot of arguments.
Wait, when you're saying stand up online, you mean like Facebook fights between comedians?
I'm talking about Facebook fights.
Because I was going to say, if it's just like sets people put up, I mean, that is what they're doing on stage. But absolutely.
I'm talking specifically about Facebook fights.
It is snark against snark, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
While we're all probably at work or should be doing something else. So
I'm usually waiting for some video to decompile, and then I'm like, I'll go to Facebook for 7 minutes, and then come back 4 hours later. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've So my thing with that is I figure I'm not going to engage, but I do observe because I'm trying to see points and grow as a person.
Yeah, doing like mental reconnaissance. Like, what are these ideas? Let's explore. Right.
And most of the time I land on the oh, well, I already knew that.
Right, like human decency.
I do a lot of I know women don't like that, or it's lots of I didn't think about that, so I'll incorporate that going forward, which I think more people do, but they're not going to necessarily admit they're wrong because people are again inherently
well, and even
insecure.
mentally, I feel like it doesn't. Even if it hits you, sometimes it takes days. So by the time it actually works its way through your system, it's not like you can go back on that Facebook thread and be like, "Hey guys, just FYI, you made a 25% change in my overall thinking on this particular issue. Thank you very much."
Yeah. So here's what my question is then, because I've definitely been the guy at times on various arguments of like women in comedy or like women in society, where I've definitely had the thought, well, I don't do that, so why are people mad at me? I've personalized it on that way.
Right.
Is there something that maybe like people who think that could take away for that could maybe take away from an argument or a thought that's maybe a little bit more positive?
Interesting.
I don't know if that's a good question or not, but
well, I'm trying to think. Well, first, you're right. When it's like when you take something personal and it's not personal, it just gets in the way of the whole argument. And I think I do see that a lot from dudes doing well, I don't do that, so et cetera, et cetera. But it's like, it's weird to me when the conclusion is that it doesn't happen. Because for me, it's like, yeah, well, I don't eat human flesh, but that doesn't mean that like cannibalism was never a thing anywhere. Like,
I think it's still a thing certain places.
Well, and Milwaukee, but there's definitely some positive things I feel like you can take from reading like a 300 comment Facebook thread. First, there's usually a couple of people sharing, like you said, like good ideas, and there's pieces in there to go, oh, okay, I hadn't thought of that. This was a great angle, and it never occurred to me. I will say I feel like you have to read 200 absolutely useless comments and 200 totally irritating comments to get to like 2 of those valuable comments. So it is mining. It's mining for diamonds in a total shit pile. Mm-hmm. But they are there. I think, unfortunately, the best conclusion you can take from any of those is that your time would have been better spent writing or making a Vine video or, like doing something for yourself to express whatever your idea is in a way that can be shared. Because as much as I get a big kick out of some of those discussions and threads, and I kind of miss the discussion aspect that I had in college, So I like that, and I think it can be very valuable. I think that people think of it as such a throwaway. People love to insult a medium. They love to go, oh, it's the internet. You know, they used to say that shit about the telegraph. Like, they used to say that shit about the telephone. People will always blame the medium as if our words no longer apply because they're in electrical form. It's like, no, it's the same shit. So a lot of people treat it as a throwaway. So there's a lot of kind of garbage there. There is a weird democracy. I think for comedians, you're accepting all these people because then you're seen as being somebody who's popular enough to hire, right? So if you have like 5,000, if you topped off your 5,000 Facebook friends, some network might want to hire you as a talking head because clearly people will listen to you. But then you have 4,000 morons sitting in their basement, like chiming in on everything you do. It's kind of like a weird. The only thing you can be sure of on the internet is that you are in no way interacting with people who would not spend their time on the internet. And that might be a valuable swath of people to go check in with. So that's the other thing you can take from those threads is go outside. That's a positive.
Because that kind of discussion, like the discourse would never reach the level of disrespect that it does if you actually had to sit and look at a person, I think.
Oh, I used to think that, but I've seen some bar brawls in my time that have maybe changed my mind. I don't know. I think you're right that there are some cowards who will always say it online and never say it in person. I feel like I pride myself on being the kind of asshole who will definitely say it to your face if you want to have a discussion about it in person, no problem. I'm not going to say something online I won't say to your face. I'm not going to hold you to a standard I'm not going to hold myself to, that kind of shit. But there is something neat about the idea that all of a sudden in an afternoon, an idea can get worked over by like a few dozen people, and you can get, linked to 4 articles that are interesting and, data details and, well, then look at this methodology. So you have to question fucking everything about your life doing these some of the times, but I don't know. I like it.
Fascinating. It's because it's almost like it's a way for if you can't necessarily be in the same room with people, it's a way to like, oh, this is how we'll share our opinions, and then we'll see and then we'll see a counterpoint.
And I think a lot of people feel like, oh, you're on the internet because you're a loser. I mean, I did just make fun of the idea, like you should go outside and you're not meeting people who aren't on the internet.
I think there's a balance too, and there's definitely like a way that you can have like there's a way that you can have a dialogue in a way that's positive that isn't just like doesn't turn into like the latest like.
I think it's also a thing about normalizing it. Like for me, it doesn't seem weird to be doing it that way because I've been on the internet since I was 14, having discussions with people and meeting people that way, back way before there were no images unless you wanted to spend an hour downloading them. So it was all talk. And I loved that. Like, I just loved that you could do it that way. I was very alone and I was very far from any kids, and there was no way for me to contact people except this computer. And I actually have a thing that I'm putting out this week about how I even got that computer because my parents didn't buy it for me. It was boys who were helping me out.
Okay.
Like random, nerdy, well-to-do boys. Helped out a girl in the maths and sciences, and did something really good because they set me up. Like every job I do now heavily uses my tech skills. And I got those tech skills, not from school, but from a bunch of doofuses that, on first glance, everybody would be like, no, a 16-year-old girl should not be hanging out with a bunch of other 16-year-old boys for 5 hours at a time. But it's like, they're teaching me like how this program works. So yes, I should. And it did me very good. But for me, it seems like such a natural place to be. And I feel like such a old lady under the bridge, just like, this was my home and you guys gentrified it with all these nerds who now want to show up and go dating. This is not how it's done. Like, you fucking jocks. Like, you're posting pictures of abs. What are abs?
Right.
Like, it was not the world when I got
the same
it.
Dudes that like, think you're a nerd for playing video games and are like, oh man,
they'll post juicing
Madden,
recipes
bro.
and and Madden cheat codes and like, dude, what about the curse of the cover? And they'll just like, read a 4-page essay about that. When generally I find when people criticize a medium or a banner head, it's because they can't criticize the content. If your main thing you say on the internet is fucking Jezebel articles, you're a piece of shit. Because unless you bring up one specific thing and talk about it, then I don't care because you're just lumping. Like every article in Time magazine is not the same fucking thing. They're written by a million writers, by different, overseen by different editors with different biases and different leans about different subjects and different depths. You can't dismiss it using that and not be full of shit. I guess I should finish that sentence.
Sure.
You can dismiss it, but you'd be a piece of, you'd be an asshole. And I think like that's why when people go, oh, well, those fucking Facebook fights are pointless. They're not pointless. I feel like sometimes things are worked out in them in a good way. And I think that people of honor generally do, like, at the end of it, be like, all right, fist bump, see you at the next show. And anyone who's really taking a grudge from, like, a Facebook battle was already, like, a hothead piece of, piece of work that needed to maybe fucking relax. You, like, get a coffee and sit the fuck down. And I think that, people get most riled up when they tell other people that are not like them what to do. And then those people show up and go,
yeah, because
shut the fuck up.
Right.
Because no one likes that.
No one likes to be told what to do, and no one likes to be told they're wrong.
Yeah. And basically, like, I've seen, like 7-8 years now of Facebook comedian feeds. And the times when you get the most shit is, when there's a rash of guys telling girls what the fuck to do. Mm-hmm. Just real insulting, like about clothes and about hair and about sets and about styles and about relationships and about how they handle anything. And I just don't see that. Like when I see girls tell guys what to do, it's always like, please don't assault me on the train. It's always like a much more realistic level of request. Like,
yes,
so I just can't like give shrift to somebody who's upset
realistic.
that somebody's, you can't take my truth. I'm like, no. If it was truth, I would have given you a thumbs up, right? Right. If your truth is, well, if you want to rape her, well, then you should be in prison. But there's always some,
yeah, and then
jag.
bring it full circle. There's the.
Are we going to talk about the Sex Pistols now?
No. It's going back to when we were talking about Louis C.K. He's got that bit about like, you should never rape anyone unless you have a good reason.
Unless you have a good reason, like you really want to have sex with them. Yeah, like that's a great joke.
Right. But there's the kernel of good human nature in saying. Even in saying a joke like that. Right, because clearly the funny part is that it's ridiculous. That's something that drives me nuts. And people miss out on that. People miss out on that when seeing just text.
Oh, yeah. When you see, like, it's hard with some of the, like, Reddit stand-up shots. You have to pick the right joke because not everything works in that format. Mm-hmm. But there is something that drives me a little nuts about that. Oh, what was my stupid thought? I dropped it. When people complain about jokes and they're like, well, that's ridiculous because how could you stand for, I don't know, fill in the stupid thing in the joke, baby rape or child porn or whatever terrible thing. It's like, the joke is that's insane. Like, that no one would ever think that's acceptable. And that's where the surprise comes from.
Yeah.
The surprise is the part in comedy that makes you laugh. There's nothing surprising about reasoned, rational approaches to life, okay? No one's reading, like, Joel Osteen and like, this guy's fucking riot. He writes, like, advice books, right? I don't know. Like,
he's sort of like, Joel Osteen, he's like one of those mega preacher types. But yeah, it's all not very funny at all.
Right, not a
His
funny guy,
sermons aren't
right?
funny.
They're all about, like, they're just, let me give you practical tips on life. And whether or not he's full of shit, it's not a laugh riot, right? Like, if you read a Susie Orman book, I'm sure she's quippy, but she's giving you mainly... here's some solid financial advice.
Yeah.
Nothing funny about that. No one goes to, like, Murray the accountant to get your feedback. Like, Murray, what do you think of this set? Like, no, that's not his expertise. He's giving you practical, rational financial advice. It's not funny. Someone telling you to spend all your money on strippers and, like, little people performers to form a human pyramid. That's hilarious. It's not a reasonable fucking suggestion. But that's the old, like, when people go, everyone's waiting to be offended. People hate comedy with the PC bullshit, blah, blah, blah. Most of that's not true, but there are times when I just see people, like, miss the whole point of jokes and just act like they're supposed to be, like, I don't know, sensible. And they can't be, because making sense isn't funny. Like, the best jokes make a little sense. They have a little, like, rationality to them that has a twist in it. And the twist is never like, and then you should roll your pennies and turn them into the bank. Like, it's not, that's just not the way it goes. It's interesting.
I think that's great. Like, great. It's funnier to not make sense, I think.
It's the only way to go. I mean, I think that one of the reasons Maria Bamford is so huge right now is because she's got something so absurdist in what she's doing, and yet you still get the thing she's going for. Mm-hmm. But it's absolutely ridiculous. Of course, she's not legitimately suggesting that if you can't afford mental health care, you should draw a rabbit's face on your own face and offer fudge from your porch because your neighbors will notice you need help. That's not a good suggestion, but it's a hilarious bit. So yeah, it's I think my my favorite discussions are not are not ones that are looking for rational solutions. My favorite discussions end up making fun of where we're all fucking trapped. And I think that's why I ended up being a comedian, mostly because I don't have any musical skills. As we discussed earlier, musicians also follow kind of the same path, but can't carry a goddamn tune. So comedy it was.
Well, I'm glad you're doing comedy, and I'm glad that we're friends, Kat.
Me too. Thanks so much, Will. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, folks, that's our show. Thank you for tuning in. If you are feeling compelled, please rate, subscribe to Between Awesome and Disaster on iTunes. I would appreciate it very much. And also check out Kat Burdick. I'll have links to her social media accounts in the description. And as always, you can check out my website, willcareyisfunny.com. That is Carey isfunny.com. You can find links to my Twitter account and to my YouTube channel. You can see a list of upcoming shows I have. And I hope you're having a good week. And if you're not, don't worry, you're almost at the end of it again. And I will see you next week between Awesome and Disaster. Take care.